I was very nervous. I remember being in a studio with Bill McCarthy, who was the newsreader, who was an ex-sports guy as well. In fact, he came back to sports in later times. So he knew where I was at because he'd been there and done that. And it was a time in the old Suite 4 at Avalon where there was no autocue, there was no earpiece to listen to the director or the producer. You were just there naked. You had your scripts on a bit of paper, and that's how you presented them. And you were very familiar with them. The bulletins were not particularly long. You might have had, I don't know, 3 or 4 items to present. And that was it. Some of them were full tracks from reporters, some of them were voiceovers, but you just did it off a bit of green paper that was in front of you. So in terms of presenting skills, you were not having too much, eye contact with the lens because you were forever looking down at a bit of paper. So it was a very different time. In fact, the use of an autocue didn't really become commonplace in sports presenting for 10 years after that. I probably spent most of my career as a sports presenter just winging it, really, talking to the lens, talking to a black hole and hoping that there was somebody on the other side. Mostly there was. The original show that I fronted was on a Saturday afternoon, so that must have been 1980. It was called One World of Sport, and it went from any time from 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock through until 6 o'clock. And I think early on there might have been a very fast turnaround in a half-hour sports review show, which was on TV2, whereby you changed blazers and changed ties and did a half-hour show which you'd spent the previous couple of hours sort of writing and producing on the go while the other show was on air. It was all a bit weird when you think about it now, the stresses that were put on the various production staff and presenters and the editors and the like. But somehow we got it there. My job really was quite simple. I was just providing some introductory links. I've got a picture of me around somewhere still in my tuxedo and bow tie standing outside Covent Garden on a summer's evening. I was required to interview Dame Curie, who was very pleasant that night. I've subsequently met her on other occasions, and she wasn't quite so agreeable, but that's another story. But it was a fun night to celebrate some of the best of the New Zealand arts scene, and thoroughly enjoyable. Princess Anne was in attendance. Various Kiwi luminaries who lived in London came along as well. It was a very good New Zealand. It felt good to be in New Zealand that night, and my role was actually quite minor, really. And I look back on it and I'm quite staggered that I was ever chosen to do it, because in those days I was an out-and-out sports reporter, a real jock. I had no affiliation or affinity with the arts community at all. By today's standards, pretty unsophisticated, you'd have to say. It certainly wasn't an HD. The replay technology was nowhere near as bold and all-encompassing as it is now. But for the time, it was high quality, was shown around the world, and we sort of certainly matched whatever the other top broadcasters of the rugby world could do at the time. We thought our coverage of rugby in terms of camera angles was certainly superior to what they were doing in, say, France or Australia, and even to a certain extent in the UK through the BBC. So we were very happy with the product that went out there. But yeah, it was groundbreaking stuff. It was probably the biggest international sports event covered in New Zealand to that stage, and certainly from a logistical point of view, moving crews and equipment around the country, it was a seriously big deal. When it finished in the middle of 1990, my involvement in the middle of 1990, and never came back, I heard that it was because TVNZ had never paid rights to the BBC for it. Yet it had been a very successful show. Top 10 programs of the week, every week, sometimes even higher than that through, what years did it run? 87 through 90, so it must have been 4 years worth, yeah. So I just enjoyed the opportunity to be a quizmaster instead of a sports broadcaster. So that was good fun, and you got to meet some of the great legends of New Zealand sport as well. And I had quite a lot to do with the production of the show in terms of setting the questions, finding the video coverage that you'd put in for the various aspects of the program, like, you know, what happened next and who's this person and all that sort of thing. So it was a chance to get involved with a pretty small team. Graham Thorne again was part of that. The late Michael Scott was the producer, and we did the shows in front of a studio audience in Auckland, starting off at Shortland Street, the old TV studios there, and then in the brand new TV centre for the last couple of series in 1989, 1990. So it went well, it was well received, but I think its essential issue was that it was on air illegally. In many respects, I prefer the early morning shift. You get your day completed pretty early, and you've done a good amount of work by the time you, particularly with half-hour bulletins between 6 a.m. and 8:30, so you've got 6 bulletins, then another half-hour bulletin at midday as well. So you've done an awful lot of talking by the time you leave the building at 12:30. He can be an absolutely enchanting, charming gentleman, but at other times he can be seriously abusive and seriously egotistical, which causes all sorts of issues everywhere. And it was going to be a bit of a train wreck, frankly, how it would end. I mean, there were a few near misses along the way. He decided he was going to quit, he was going to retire. As he said, he reckoned he had enough money to go off and see the world and the hell with television and all that sort of thing. I don't know whether he ever did or whether he ever has, but I never inquired. But his ego required a great deal of stroking to keep him in the job for as long as it did. Inevitably, there was going to be issues, and the Annie and Sachinand business followed a couple of weeks later by Mrs. Dick Shit. The dick shit hit the fan, didn't it? The hourly grind or the daily grind it's quite a big deal when you think about it, that the Olympic Games is 16 days, and you just can't think of anything else. At least in Beijing, it was at the right time of the day. You go to, because you're behind New Zealand, so you're not going to work till midday. It's when you're fronting events out of Atlanta, which was just terrible. It's 6 p.m. in New Zealand is 2 a.m. in Atlanta. England's just as bad. Glasgow this year, you had to get out of bed at 5 o'clock in the morning because you wanted to be at your broadcast point by 7 a.m. because that was 6 p.m. in New Zealand, you see. So you've got to factor in the time differences. So it's just the physical work, the actual gathering of the information, and the broadcasting is no different, but because of the time differences and because of the amount of hours involved, you've got to be, frankly, sometimes I won't say as fit as the athletes, that's doing them a major disservice, but you've got to be in pretty good nick to be able to do it day after day for 10, 12, 14 days at a time. I actually felt privileged to be able to offer, my little contribution to it. It was, again, something outside my usual, what's that word that All Black coaches use? Skill set, outside my comfort zone, but rewarding from a broadcasting point of view because it was covered well. When you're the commentator or the host for an event such as that, you have to know that less is more when it comes to providing your voiceovers and your broadcasting for it. The same happens at opening and closing ceremonies for events such as the Olympic Games. It's the old adage that you're taught very early on in television, just let the picture tell the story. And the best television commentators, whether they be of sports or of events, are those that add to the picture, don't dominate the picture. I like to think that I've been a competent broadcaster. I don't think I've been especially outstanding in any particular way. Certainly never going to be remembered as one of the legends of the industry, like, say, Paul Holmes or Selwyn Toogood or Dougal Stevenson, those guys have been. I've just been a jobbing, competent broadcaster, really, and that's really how I see myself. I can do a few things, turn my hand to most things, and just sort of have looked upon it as a job, really, without looking to indulge myself in all the other nonsense that might sometimes go with it.